Hey everyone, welcome to session 57 of the Behavioral Observations podcast. We're going to get you quickly into today's episode, but first I just want to say some thanks to some sponsors who brought this episode to us today. The first being Constellations Behavioral Services. They are some folks who are local to me here, providing services in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. We'll hear more about them later, as well as the ACT Boot Camp that is taking place in Baltimore at the end of September. Again, we'll hear more details about that further on in the show. And then finally, we're going to spend the episode today talking with Jason Simmons, the President and Executive Director of Clinical Behavior Analysis. We're going to extend the conversation that we started about a year ago with regard to parent training. We're also going to talk about just some organizational behavioral stuff and just a lot of other neat things that they've got going on down there in Kentucky. Lots of great stuff happening in that organization and in that state as well. So I won't delay us any further. So without any further ado, please enjoy this fun conversation I had with Jason Simmons.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Hey everyone, welcome to this session of the Behavioral Observations Podcast. You know, if you've been listening for a little while, way back in session 36, we did an episode on rapid training, and it generated a lot of positive feedback from listeners. And so what I wanted to do is bring back the brainchild and creator of the rapid system and go with a little deeper dive. And so with that having been said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Jason Simmons, President and Executive Director of Clinical Behavior Analysis. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's awesome to be here, man. So grateful and fortunate to get to do this.
Yeah, you know, it's been about a year since we talked about this last, and like I said, it did generate quite a bit of buzz amongst the listeners and lots of questions and things like that. And in that span of time, I've gotten to know you guys at CBA a little bit better, and if people have listened to the last couple of episodes, they've probably heard the little jingle, if you will, and you guys have become a sponsor. And it's because you guys are doing a lot of cool stuff down there in Kentucky. But one of those things is how one of the many things that you guys are doing that's pretty exciting is this rapid training that you've got going on. So I want to take an opportunity to take a deeper dive into that and also talk about some of the other cool things that are again happening down there in Kentucky. So we got a little bit.
It's a great place. Great place to be.
Cool. I'm sure that's probably true, and it's probably even more true when it's I don't know, about 20 below here in New Hampshire in February. So I'm sure it's probably a little bit more temperate than the climate we get at certain parts of the year. So anyway, so like I said, you're the President and Executive Director of Clinical Behavior Analysis. So I wanted to kind of give you a minute to kind of talk about how you got into behavior analysis and how you ended up being the the executive director of this what is probably the largest ABA provider in the state of Kentucky. So why don't you fill us in from there?
Well, I actually went to the University of North Texas. Started in about 1994. Became a direct support professional in Denton County. Back then, they called the county organizations MHMRs. And so I started there. I had no idea. I think my experience is a lot like many others. I sort of serendipitously, came across behavior analysis in my search for trying to find what I really wanted to do. And there's a lot to my story. I'm starting out as a direct support professional, getting my bachelor's degree there at UNT. I took a course. I think it was actually a culture course with Richard G. Smith from the Department of Behavior Analysis at UNT. And then I was hooked from that point forward. I graduated in 98 with my undergraduate in, they have a special degree there for folks who struggle to find what they want to do called the BAAS. It's Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences. So I had like a double major in sociology, music, theater, and behavior analysis. I was able to kind of put all those together. I went on a trip to Africa with my sociology teacher, and we took some medical technology over to Ghana. It was pretty cool. It was these syringes that when you give the shot, you push the button, the syringe would retract back into the syringe. And my professor back then, Dr. David Williams, kind of encouraged me to talk more to Rick. And it was good timing because as soon as I got back, I went to the department, talked to Rick. Somehow they let me in the program. And then once I got into the graduate program, I think, that pretty much changed everything for me, because when I came into his program, he's doing a lot of research on self-injurious behavior. And I was there with my colleagues, Travis Blevins, Kathleen Bailey, Dewey Lee, Robert Churchill. When I came in, a lot of folks graduated. So it was kind of like, they left and I was there, and he was like, well, you're the guy. And so I had unity. Over a period of 4 years, I was able to work one-on-one with him, and we did a lot of research. We published some stuff. I became a case manager. Special Olympics, I was volunteering. I had 3 jobs at one point in time. I had to pay for school myself. And over a period of about 4 years, I graduated from UNT, and my friend Dewey Lee, he recruited me out to Louisville to help this hospital that was restraining kids with autism and using a psych model. So we came here. We got rid of restraints on that unit. There were no community BCBAs. So I just said, hey, this is an opportunity. Let's go in the community. Went to the community, and I think, I had one client in Indiana, and within 30 days I had 60 clients, and then I had 2 or 3 staff. And, there was nobody else doing this. Back then, it was year 2001. All the services being provided were typically provided by a psychologist or a social worker, or what they call a positive behavior support specialist. Really, it was just someone with a master's degree in a related field. So since then, obviously, over the last 18 years, we've been able to build Kentucky ABA. We've been able to work with a lobbyist. We were able to pass a licensure bill in 2010. And that also was put in with an autism mandate around that time, 2014. Medicaid added licensed behavior analysts to the state plan amendment. So a lot of things have happened over that period of time. And in between there, I was back and forth from Texas to Kentucky, settling back here in 2011 permanently. So I had a lot of good, I'm fortunate because I had so many good opportunities during that time.
Just out of curiosity, when you first came to Kentucky, what were the funding sources? Because, I was around back in the day. I think we're probably of similar generation X vintage. And most of the behavior analytics services were provided an institutional or university or some type of educational setting, and with maybe some stuff in the community, and so what was going on in Kentucky at that time that was perhaps absent elsewhere?
It's incredible. I mean, you would not believe, I came here, I worked at a psychiatric hospital. That's a very unique opportunity for a behavior analyst in 2001. I remember it so well because during my orientation, at this hospital, it's a Catholic hospital, 9/11 happened, during my orientation. So it's like, I don't know, speaking colloquially, I mean, it was imprinted on me. So, that whole initial experience. So, being in a psych hospital, we pretty much carte blanche, we could do whatever we needed. Our primary goal, though, with Dr. Tucker, Dr. Stocker, all these psychiatrists from Johns Hopkins, from Yale, from Harvard, all these awesome medical folks, they just loved what we did because we brought them data. No one was bringing them data. We're bringing them data and saying, hey, you changed the medication here. This is what the data reports. This is what we did. So they really liked us, and they were also working in the community. So I didn't really know anything about funding in the community. I originally started billing Blue Cross Blue Shield. I was one of the first BCBAs to bill insurance over here. And back then, TRICARE had one code. It was like 99109 or something. Like it was a standard code. So we became a TRICARE provider. And then what I learned was there were these Medicaid waivers out there. And it's incredible. These behavior specialists who, had no training in ABA were providing these services called behavior support services. And pretty much they're able to provide, 10, 20, 30, 40 hours a week of services. I learned about the Medicaid waiver world. And, once you become Medicaid certified, it's a lot easier to get into and understand other funding sources because it's so complicated and over-regulated. Your policies, I think we had initially 65 policies with one employee we had to have, to meet all the guidelines and regulations. And then in Kentucky, we get audited frequently. We just had three back-to-back, actually 2 concurrent and 1 right after audit. So I think for me, that's been good for our crew. We have about 85 to 90 staff at this point in time. And our goal and our mantra really is to be audit ready at all times. So this environment has just required that. I know a lot of other states where I came from, Texas, they didn't have anything like that. There's no way you could go into the community, work with an adult or a child through a Medicaid waiver for 6 to 10 hours a week, and Medicaid would pay for it. I believe 1 in 4 people in Kentucky have some form of disability and get Medicaid.
Really?
So, yeah, something I believe, whether it's the state plan amendment through the managed care organizations, right now there's 5 contracted MCOs here. And since the LBAs were put into that SPA, that opened up additional funding. So we have 3 Medicaid waivers: brain injury, adult, child. The Michelle P. waiver, you can get 40 hours of service. And then we have 5 MCOs and 17 commercial networks. So, this is a great environment for behavior analysts. There's less than 200 BCBAs here, tons of funding, tons of people that need the service. So, yeah, I never would have thought about coming here. I was recruited here by a colleague. If I didn't know him, I would have probably been in Colorado.
I love it. I love my job. My name's Alyssa, and I work for Constellations Behavioral Services. I love my job because I feel like I'm making a difference in children's lives. I think the most exciting piece of the job is really knowing that you're going to be able to help people who are really desperately seeking out support. When I'm interviewing someone, I get really excited when people say, I know I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm really excited to make change in kids' lives. I want to research, I want to learn, I want support, I want feedback, I want to see where this field is going. Awesome. So I would say someone coming into Constellations needs to be passionate, excited, willing to learn, willing to grow, and willing to come along for the ride.
For more information about job opportunities in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, visit constellationsbehavioral.com/careers. I see. Well, we can come back to Kentucky, I guess, and at least talking about the attributes in a little bit. But what I want to talk to you about is, how you guys developed the parent training system that you called Rapid. I know Brandon Franklin gave us kind of an overview of it
Yes.
in that earlier episode, but.
And that was great.
Yeah. That was a fun conversation for sure. But for those who may have missed that episode, or obviously it's been over a year or just about a year since we aired it, may have forgotten. If you can kind of tell us why you started it, and then after that, just give us a brief rundown of what it's all about.
Okay. Well, initially for me, being I think at that time when I was here in Kentucky, there were 10 BCBAs in the whole state. So most of them were at the ICFMR. There's 4 ICFMRs here.
Okay.
And they were,
can you tell us what for those who don't know, what's an ICFMR?
Yes. An ICFMR is an intermediate care facility for the MR word. And now they call them ICF IDDs. They've gotten rid of that term, but still on the paperwork, we still see ICFMR. And it's essentially, it's an institutional setting that's supposed to be more collaborative with the community. It's a result of lawsuits that occurred in the past because adults weren't able to get out of these institutions. And the Department of Justice really regulates these ICFs so that they sort of mandate getting these folks back out into the community. So that's, there's a lot of work to be done at those institutions, very structured, very intensive, very expensive. And so, at that particular time, working in the community and through Medicaid waivers, I could see the writing on the wall. These folks, these ICMR, they're shutting them down. They want folks in the community. Why? Well, it's not only better for the patients, but it's cheaper. It's probably half or less or than that, even probably a third of the cost to have someone in an institutional setting. So when you do Medicaid waiver, there's a whole heavy set of regulations. So your assessment has to include certain items, whether you like it or not. You've got to have it in there. So you have these 10-page assessments, and you have these 8 to 10-page behavior plans, not because you want to necessarily, but because it's required. You have a set of regulations. It has to address all of these things. And it doesn't always quite make sense. It's just what it is. You have to follow. So, as you know, when you're working with caretakers and families, you walk in with a 10-page behavior plan. Oftentimes this staff group, they know the client better than you. They've been there for years and years, and they're already overloaded, so giving them these complex plans, over time, that's kind of just what you're supposed to do. And so for me, I got frustrated. I was just frustrated with the process, frustrated with the regulation, all the things that are required. And so I just sat down one day and, I had been reading Glenn Latham's The Power of Positive Parenting. I was getting ready. We were, getting ready to have our own kids. So for me, it was somewhat selfish. I wanted to be a good parent. So I was looking at Rexon Forehand's The Non-Compliant Child from the 70s. Now they've got several editions of that. They call it now Parenting the Strong-Willed Child. So Glenn Latham's work was influenced, Nicholas Long, Rex Forehand, their work, from the 70s all the way up, and the principles of applied behavior analysis. So what I came up with, I started having conversations on, hey, we have limited time. We have a lot of regulation. How do we get the best, most effective technology transferred over to staff, over to parents in the most efficient way so that we can get buy-in, they could see results early, and we could do it in a non-complex way so that it's fun and it's easy. That was my goal. And so I started looking at what is required. Like if you have staff folks, what are the most critical skills that they need when interacting with a learner who is going to challenge them behaviorally, sort of folks that are, I guess, behaviorally unattractive. They're coming in, they don't have any skills, they go through orientation, they're not really trained on how to interact. So they typically rely on the way they were treated by their parents or by other people. So the rapid training really evolved out of frustration with the system. And I wanted to beat that. I wanted to have a solution with that. So if you look at Parenting the Strong-Willed Child, now that was designed for kids between the ages of 2 and 8 years old, and it was designed for kids with ADD, ADHD. I really liked that work. So I said, if this is working with this population, look at these skills here. It made sense to me. Let's take these core critical skills. Let's use principles of applied behavior analysis. Let's look at Glenn Latham's work on siblings, on working with neurotypical kids, and let's combine this into a program that makes sense to us. So the credit really is to those folks. I didn't really create this. I took what I had. There was a need, there was a problem. I took from what I knew would work, and I sort of designed something that was memorable. I knew rapid. It communicates kind of what we want. We want to get you results as fast as we can. And so rapid, the 5 skills: rewarding, attending, providing breaks, ignoring non-dangerous behavior or minimizing attention. And the last one, direction giving. Those skills are required. You have to be able to, you have to know how to, and I'm not talking about tangible rewards necessarily, although that is sometimes needed. But when you interact with the folks that we work with, you need to know how to effectively provide rewarding statements, and you need to know how to interact with them and how to attend to them, which is different than rewarding. Attending is you're saying, I'm interested in you. So attending is really beneficial for behavioral motivation, getting the interactions positive so that the learner is looking for you, not running away from you. And then providing breaks. There's, in the book, it's called timeout, but there's ways you can utilize breaks preventatively, especially with precursor intervention. So we modified that. We modified rewarding and attending. The ignoring non-dangerous behavior is really just a set of minimization of attention. How do you train a staff person to do that, or a caretaker or a mom or dad? And then once they can do those things, then we get to the instruction, the direction giving part. We break that down. We figure out how can we, now that the interactions are more positive, and you'd be surprised at how it affects problem behavior just by changing those interactions. It's incredible. Now we get to the instruction part. And so there is where we're at the behavior plan. Let's take these core critical interaction skills that mom and dad or staff, they're already successful. They're already seeing results. And let's embed this into this plan in these terms so that they can understand them. So we don't even use the term reinforcement. We call it rewarding because they just understand that. So when they are able to do these things, and we train them not just in a pre and post test, we don't just do didactic instruction. We do that, but we do practice, coaching, and feedback in a BST model. So they are actually practicing these skills just like you would practice putting a tire on a car or fixing an engine. We break it down, and you'd be really surprised at how many times we work with folks and they say, I know how to do that. I know how to reward. I understand we use timeout. When we really break this down in baseline and we give them a set of data that shows them what they're doing, then we get buy-in. Because oftentimes they don't realize that when we ask them, for example, to play or just, here's a leisure activity, I want to observe you for 5 minutes, and we look and 90% of the interactions are questions and instructions, and we show them that and they go, wow, because we'll say, how do you think you did? And they'll go, I didn't give any instructions or any questions. And I understand, I'm not criticizing them because I'm a parent myself. I understand. It's like when you're in the moment, it's like you can't see the forest for the trees. That's your kid. When we show them the data, they are very surprised often, wow, I can't believe that,
It's so easy to inadvertently do that. So regardless of whether you're a behavior analyst or a layperson or what have you, obviously we as behavior analysts are more sensitive to those things, perhaps. But yeah, I get it. Yeah. So you guys have taken this kind of on the road a little bit, or at least you're starting to use this training in a variety of settings with a variety of different, population groups, right?
Yes, and so I would say from like 2000, my first daughter was born in 2005. Right around the time my second daughter was born in 2008, right when the market crash was occurring, my daughter was born with lissencephaly. Lissencephaly is a cephalic disorder. It's a brain-based disorder. It means smooth brain. Some folks might be familiar with microcephaly. You see kids, sometimes they have a small head, and micro means small in brain. And so I would say right around 2008 is when we really started putting all this together. And what I did is I started testing it with my kids and then running it by, all my colleagues. Getting feedback. I'm still getting feedback, and it's been refined for the last 10 years. So we've designed the rapid training. Of course, we have a workshop for various trainings, and then we have the clinical aspect where we work really intensely for about 26 to 30 weeks with the family, teaching them. We also will concurrently do an assessment. This fits into your assessment paradigm really well once you learn it, and then you embed it into the planning and still meeting all those requirements. But yeah, so we have a version for caretakers and parents. We have a version for staff, and we have a version for teachers. And then we're working on a version for first responders, EMS, police, firemen, community helpers as well. And so the real big benefit here is that when we start this program, we only start with requiring the caretakers to work for 10 minutes a day. That's it. We get 10 minutes a day of them having solid, positive interactions with the kids. You get so much information just from that. And so once we get a good 10 minutes, then we beef that up to 2 settings with 10 minutes, and then 3 settings with 10 minutes. And then pretty soon an hour, then we're doing mornings, then we're doing mornings through lunch. And then pretty soon, the idea here is that we're giving them these critical skills that they need, and it becomes part of their lifestyle. It's not a plan to be faded. It's not like a diet where you go on a plan. It's a lifestyle change. So they retain these skills for the rest of their lives, and they benefit from them, for a very long period of time. So it's been very successful, and I'm proud of what we've been able to do, and we're still working on extending its use, and we're working with the University of Louisville. I've got a great team. Sharon True, our program director, Stephen Foreman, our business director. We've got a new compliance officer, a training coordinator. Of course, my wife is incredible. So, now the timing's really, really right. It's such utility. There's so much utility here. I've kind of waited to get the right team in place before we extended it further. So we are in that phase where we're working on this training with multiple populations, because here the subject matter is the caretaker, not necessarily, the client, sort of indirectly, obviously. But even when you train a plan, the caretaker is the primary change agent.
Oh, sure,
so yeah.
I'm excited to see how you guys have adapted this to emergency services personnel or law enforcement, and perhaps to a lesser extent teachers who may have less time to develop a relationship with the client. Sounds like you got a lot of neat things going on there. I'm sure I'm going to get emails from folks saying, "Where can I get Rapid?" This sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I know you said you're developing some workshops and things like that.
Yes.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but as far as disseminating this technology is concerned, what are your plans for that?
For now, you can go to cbacares.com, click on services, look for the Rapid Training link, click on that. There's a lot of resources there that we put in there, complimentary resources. There's a good PDF there that kind of outlines things for you. There's also some other information on just what those skills are, what the rationale is. So just go to cbacares.com, click on services, look for parent, teacher, caretaker, rapid training, click on that. Right now, we had initially worked with Dr. Pennington, who's now at UNC Charlotte, who was at U of L. We are also now currently working with Terry Scott, who's doing research on interactions with teachers in the classroom. So we're collaborating. We're actively meeting with their coders. They have professional data collectors already set for this. So we also have a really nice practicum program with U of L and a couple of other online universities where folks can work at CBA and get their degrees. So we have that. Research isn't it's not a big priority necessarily because it's not something we have time, but we're able to take sort of overlay some of this into what we're currently doing. Our business director, Steve Foreman, recently got a grant with a community organization through the local feed organization, the Feed of Louisville, where all those funds are just going to be for training these staff on rapid skills training. And it's unique because the agency it cares for folks similar to what my daughter was diagnosed with. It's a medically fragile child pediatric community program. So it's very unique. It's a unique provider type. So, in terms of that, we're doing a lot of those things. And my ultimate goal is to get this ready for 2019 ABAI. I believe it's in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Have a panel discussion there on caretaker training possibly with some of our colleagues in other states and be able to discuss and disseminate more of this. But originally with Dr. Pennington is getting a manual together so that we can kind of package this in a way that it can be put out into the public domain. But for now, cbacares.com. Go there. You'll get a lot of information. There's so many things you could do with this. My goal is to stay focused on getting a manual together, getting this presentation panel discussion ready for next year's ABAI. And hopefully that, we'll get that together and we'll be able to get more feedback and we'll get it out there. And plus, it's just been a lot of fun doing this. I mean, people really tend to really eat this program up. New clinicians that we get that come in, they love it. It gives them, when you first go into a home for the first time, it can be pretty intimidating. So we're able to give a clinical repertoire to our veteran staff, to our new staff. That's very effective. That's based on principles consistent with behavior analysis. And so, yeah, I mean, we're doing all those things, and hopefully we'll have the manual done by next year, and we'll be able to pitch it out at ABAI.
Very cool. And I will link that CBAcares.com and the services and all that stuff. I'll put those links in the notes for this particular episode, so cool. Folks can go to behavioralobservations.com and check it out there. If you listened to the show for a little while, you definitely know by now that acceptance and commitment therapy is a very popular topic. That said, I often get emails from listeners asking questions about how they can receive additional training on ACT. And not just that, I hear from many BCBAs who want to learn how to implement ACT, but are rightly concerned with staying within their scope of practice. So it's for these reasons and more that I am excited to partner with Praxis Continuing Education to promote their upcoming ACT Bootcamp for Behavior Analysts that's being held in Baltimore, Maryland from September 27th through 30th. As the title of the event implies, this is specifically designed for BCBAs and not for social workers, clinical psychologists, mental health counselors, etc. And all told, there are 32 and a half Type 2 CEs that are available across the 4-day bootcamp experience, including CEs that will satisfy your supervision and ethics requirements. Again, this event is designed to address the needs of the everyday behavior analyst and will be taught by leading figures in our field such as Stephen Hayes, Jonathan Tarbox, Evelyn Gould, and Tom Sabo. So if this is something you're interested in, check out praxiscet.com/BOP. Listen, I know that's a mouthful, so I'm going to spell it. praxiscet.com/BOP. Or you can simply go to the show notes of this episode where I'll have a link to it. If you do decide to attend and want to save $50 at registration, use the promo code BOP. I hope you get a chance to check this great event out. So as we were talking, we talked a little bit yesterday to kind of outline what we want to accomplish in this interview, and what came of that conversation was, well, at least part of it was a lot of potential but questions about Rapid, right?
Yeah, right.
So or potential concerns or critiques or what have you. So what I want to do is just kind of so as we were chatting, I kind of made a little list of them. So I'm going to throw them at you. I'm going to throw you all the but questions. And,
let's do it, man. Let's go.
So, all right.
So this is good because this is what we want. We want, that's what makes this good. We want that feedback. We want to be able to predict. We want to be able to predict what it is that we're going to get from everybody, so that we can adjust appropriately as needed, or have a good response.
All right. So here we go. We're getting you ready for ABAI in Chicago.
All right. Here we go.
All right. So the first kind of critique or issue that some people have raised is that you're providing a treatment without a functional assessment.
Right. So, and I think that, yes,
that's
I think that's a legitimate question. When you do a lit review and you look at what we're doing, this is not a treatment program. This is a staff training, caretaker training program. So what we've been able to do though, we're not prescribing treatment. We do a functional assessment in the community. We have to do an indirect functional assessment. And during that time, typically with our veteran clinicians, like right now we've got Sable Duchette, we've got Holly Birch, Jacob Powell, several others. They are giving that value to the caretaker from day one, and they're concurrently doing the assessment, because for your assessment and for your plan, if you're going to train a group and they're not able to demonstrate these skills effectively, you're going to have a failed plan. I don't care if it's the best plan, or if it's, Dr. Know-It-All who wrote the plan, or if it's just the greatest plan ever. If the folks you're working with don't understand how to give directions, if they don't understand how to reward, how to attend, when to give breaks preventatively, and if they're inefficient with those things, and typically without training, folks are, then you're going to have a failed plan. So this training package is so versatile. When we're able to observe and look at and train these critical interaction skills, we get tons of assessment information. Typically, we do this training. We start from day one. We do it with and concurrent with our assessment, but we also get tons of referrals just for private pay grants, just to get this training to a group of staff or for a particular family, or the 7 or 8 districts that we're working with now that are just begging for more and more of this training. So, there's an aspect to, and if you look in the literature, look at Rex Forehand, look at Glenn Latham. I mean, there's no functional assessment part of their protocol. They are putting together trainings. And so the question is, and this is more of a research question that we'll be able to address with the crews that we're working with there at the University of Louisville, is, what effect does this have on behavior challenges, during that time? For me, as a clinician, because I'm a trained clinician, I think of it like getting the inertia, getting the ball rolling. If we can get the assessment done, and then I've got mom, dad, they're practicing how to be more effective and how to interact. And again, these are all antecedent based. We're designing it as an antecedent training package. By the time we get to the plan training, they're already rewarding and attending. They've learned how to give directions better. They're bought into this, and they are primed and ready. That's just another part of the frustration I had, because typically what was going on with the required things here in Kentucky, you can only do like a couple hours a week. So it would take sometimes 6 to 12 weeks to get an assessment done. The family's waiting. They're frustrated because they're like, what's going on? And we're like, well, it's the regulatory things, we can only do, they're only allowing us to do a little bit here, a little bit there. It's not like commercial insurance. And then we get a plan. And sometimes I've even seen 3 months go by, and then they get to a plan, and the families, they're so frustrated at that point in time, they're done with you. So we've flipped that with Rapid, incorporating that and weaving it into what we do as part of and concurrent with the assessment. Instead of being frustrated, they're ready to go. They're primed and ready. And we're also continuing, because, assessment never stops. We're getting data 24 hours a day, and we're able to evaluate these things, at least in an applied way, with some partial interval or frequency type data that we're not gathering inter-observer agreement, but we're getting enough clinical data to make good decisions here. And so some of these questions need to be answered by research groups, and we're leaving that up to the academics out there to do that. Our doors are open. We're currently working with Terry Scott and the department there. We've also worked with Eric and Molly Dubuque, and wonderful people here, amazing program. So there's still work to be done there, but the evidence-based component of this is that rewarding is effective. It's defined by its effects. Reinforcement. If you have better interactions before the problem behavior occurs, and you're able to deliver more reinforcement, we know what that does. There's research for that. We also know if you're a better instructor, if you're providing clear instructions, and instead of defective instructions per se, you're going to just have better success. So there's a real proactive part of this. There's a momentum component for the caretaker. There's a buy-in component. There's a getting results from day one component. Really, I don't know how things are in other states, except like Texas and a few others, but all this was designed out of the frustration with that system. So really, it was put together to give the most value to the caretakers and parents. Because as a parent myself, we had in-home services. So, I learned a lot from that experience, caring for my daughter, having people come to my home. My home became a hospital, and your home is then no longer a home. So I was just heavily motivated to get a package together for these caretakers who 80% of the time their marriage is on the rocks, or there's a financial problem or substance abuse problem. I think it's 80% of the time when you have a child with a disability, you're likely to get a divorce. So my motivation was to address all those problematic areas. And in doing that, I think we've got something pretty special, from this.
Cool. Another I guess, potential critique or, concern or whatever is that that it's overly simplistic, or it's stuff that everyone knows, how would you address those concerns? Let's say you have a new clinician who joins the team and says, oh yeah. Well, of course I tell people how to, use reinforcement and things like that.
Well, I say, show me, because it's designed to be simple on paper. It has to be. And that's a direct response to all the complexity of all the requirements and all the things, there's our FA and BSP audit checklist is 155 items.
Really?
So to meet the auditor guidelines, and we've got it broken down into, we have a scorecard system that we use. And so when we train folks, we score their assessments and plans. It's 155 items between the two documents that have to be accounted for. So when you're looking at a system like that, we're talking about, response effort and over complex. The simplicity thing is, so what? It's supposed to be. I know in my training with Jesus Rosales and Shala and Sigrid and Janet, Cloyd Heighton at UNT, they gave us assignments, and they would say, develop this training. We would bring it, and Jesus would say, nope, do it over. You need to make this so a high school student could implement it. So, back then I was like, what is he talking about? But now obviously I understand. So I think this element of complexity is a problem for what we're doing. It's problematic. We need to make sure that we can be effective when we're transferring technology through, a behavior skills training or whatnot over to a caretaker. If you've got a complex program, I can tell you as a parent myself, I'm going to throw it in the trash because my life is complex enough.
Sure.
I don't need, you're walking into a situation where there's tons of demands already, so that's why we start. And we tell our folks, just give us 10 minutes a day at first. That's all we need. And I've had a lot of folks, and we've worked with thousands of families, and they'll start out saying this, we had so-and-so before, we had 5 BCBAs before, and we waited 3 months to get a damn plan in place. I just say, give me 10 minutes a day for a couple of weeks, and then you can make a judgment on it. And what I see from that one little aspect is the simplicity of this program is what makes it strong, because the implementation of this is by far, it's not simple. You have to practice. Putting a tire on a car is simple, right? But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't have the right tools, you're going to get frustrated. You're not going to know how to do it. That tire is pretty heavy. You need to know how to do all those steps. So, that's the way I see that argument. I just see it as a moot point, because what matters is the data and the outcomes, not the simplicity or complexity. If you've got a complex program that works, great. I want to see it. I want to see the outcomes, because in the community, you better have something pretty straightforward and simple. Otherwise, I can tell you from my experience, it's going to get tossed in the trash. Got
it. And then the last kind of concern is, what about the funding source? We always hear that, if it's not directly related to, medical necessity, et cetera, funding is difficult to come by. And I'm probably like the least informed person on how that works, because I primarily consult the schools. But how do you guys address that from a funding perspective, particularly your billing insurance and things like that?
That's a good question. I think that's a valid question. And, what we've done, and initially when this first program went out, it was in San Antonio, Texas. I was with Alonzo Andrews. I was contracted there. CBA was contracted with the Autism Treatment Center. They have a school. So this started out with grants. So we actually got a grant initially from the hospital. We worked with the pediatric group there, and the main, autism ATC with Ivy Zwicker and Anna, all those folks that were connected to the governor back then with autism, and we were able to get grants. So initially, I say, seek out grants, but also, and this depends. This is more of a gray area, because it depends on your state guidelines. Read your licensure law, look at your regulation guidelines for your funding source, and ask yourself, are these skills important for this particular family or this particular child? And if so, how do I incorporate this into what we need in terms of treatment? Because what we're able to do here is when we do our assessment, we're getting information on the fact that caretaker is really, say, for example, just say they're defective on that rewarding skill. Well, that's going to be a big part of your plan. And training them, you're going to have to be able to deliver an effective rewarding statement. And you're going to have to be able to effectively label and imitate behavior, which is attending, which is functionally different from rewarding. You're going to have to be able to ignore non-dangerous behavior. You know what I mean? Sure. These are critical, the most basic critical skills. So I just say, we start with grants, look at how it might, if you wanted to take this to court, you could kind of look at it and go, these are critical skills that every potential treatment plan is going to need. It's not a cookie cutter program. A rapid program for Johnny and Jane are going to look different because their reinforcers are different, their histories, the ontogeny, everything's different. So the way you attend to one person might not even include a verbal statement. I know clients, they just like for you to do a wrestling move just in the air or a tap on the shoulder. You have to know the client, and so we do all that through a complimentary screening, and we do a free what we call a PIA. It's a preliminary intake. We get tons of information right off the bat, even before the first session. I'm all about being as proactive as you can. So in terms of funding, if you can't do it, you can't do it. But what I'm saying is you're going to be doing it anyway at some point.
I see. That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about some of the best practices. So for implementing Rapid, so we've described kind of why you developed it, briefly what it is. And again, people can go back to session 36 to, kind of get into more detail about each one of those letters in the acronym.
Yeah.
But you guys obviously have tons of experience training people and getting these skills off the ground. So what have you found that works really well in terms of implementing this program?
I think integrity of treatment is an important variable too. And when you're looking at that complexity variable, we're looking at the integrity of the overall program. We're looking too at the length of service. If we're spending more time, being frustrated and having to spend another 3 months on just getting the folks to buy into the whole concept of the service, I mean, there's a lot of advantages to this particular program. No, I think it's a good standalone program. So in terms of a staff training program, Denny Reed has published a lot of really good, straightforward strategies for training staff. There's tons of staff training out there, but very few of them have an actual competency component. Very few of them have an actual behavior skills training component. So it's a standalone program. Also, do you need your trainees to be able to do these critical skills well? And if you do, you need to assess these skills. And so that's part of your assessment. And so there you have another, standalone, and then it's weaved within your assessment because you are obviously, and it depends on the client, depends on the funding, it depends on so many different variables. I would say the majority of the time we find that whoever it is we're working with, they oftentimes don't even really fully understand what a demand is. They just don't. They weren't trained, and I don't expect them to. They don't understand when they point to the chair and look firmly. That's a demand context. That's counted as a demand. There's things like that. So you just have to ask yourself questions in terms of funding. And so we've got so much grant work and private clients that get this service. What we do is we give free in services on this. So, for example, the local county, 7 counties, or the local like MHMR type of agency, we'll just offer free in service. We'll acclimate them to what this program is, and typically we get referrals the next day. And so, it's either a standalone or it's part of your initial assessment because it's relevant, because it's going to be part of your treatment. and you're capitalizing on the integrity of the program. You're getting the buy-in quicker, and then by the time you get to that plan, you're not dealing with all the frustration of everything, because they've already taken this to a whole new level. They're giving you feedback. They're telling you what's working and what's not. And what you do is you shape up through these 5 skills the treatment protocol. And you do it with no technical terms, with lots of data, and with lots of participation on the caretaker part. So, those two things are important for me.
And when you emphasized earlier about starting small, for example, 10 minutes a day, obviously the data would be the guide of sorts, but what sort of intervals or increments do you step up, once you see some of these skills being acquired by the various stakeholders that you've trained?
Yeah. And a lot of the time, I'll just use an example, like the attending skill is typically new. Most people aren't used to hearing attending. And I think of attending, if you have a social component, and if your learner is engaged and they find value in social interaction, attending is easier, obviously. But if they don't, there's things you can do as well. Attending is when you label and imitate the learner's behavior, the learner's appropriate behavior. So adults do this all the time. We look at each other. You shake your head, I shake my head. You wink at me, I wink at you. You do a fist pump, I do a fist pump. Why do we do that? We're saying I'm interested in you. Of course, it could function as reinforcement, but we're more interested at that time in getting that skill acquired. So getting them acclimated to doing that and training them, we do it from that data set. And really, when we're working on these skills, we do it in that 10-minute interval, because we want them successful. We typically start with an activity that's easy for them so that they can practice. So there's no demands typically at all from the beginning. And we want them to contact reinforcement. We want the caretaker to see value in this. I mean, I test it all the time. Just for a 2-minute thing with the new kid, I'll just start attending to that child, and it changes a lot of that child's behavior. It depends on the child, but a lot of times some kids will just start complying. But it depends on the kid. You have to really base it on that individualization of that. So the 10 minutes a day is to get them fluent and acclimated to what it is you're doing, and then you go from there.
I see. Jason, is there anything else you want to say about Rapid before we move on to the next topic?
No, I just want to say that what you're doing is incredible here with the Behavioral Observation podcast. I think it's amazing. I feel lucky to be here. And so I'm open, to questions. People can contact me. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information. And I look forward to seeing everybody next year at ABA. So
we will, I'll post the contact page of CBA in the show notes. So if people want to get a hold of you, they can do that.
Sure.
Before we leave off here, I do want to talk a little bit about, or give you an opportunity to talk about CBA more generally. I know you guys have been refurbishing or this huge facility that you're about to open and things like that. So why don't you take a minute and tell us about what you guys have going on in Louisville?
Well, I owe a lot of this to my team. My wife, Robin Simmons, she's been incredible. I couldn't do this without her. She's been the administrative executive director for the last 10 years. Like I'd said before, I've got a really strong team of BCBAs that have experience in business and experience in directing and management. So the timing has been good. The building itself has taken a little while. It's very expensive. Dealing with contractors is not always fun, but we're about 95% done. And we've been providing community services for a very long time, about 18 years. So we've added the center-based component because, there's advantages for some to be able to train in a more controlled environment. And then most of our program there will be an early intervention program. It'll be a very intensive or an intensive component to working with young kids that have a diagnosis of autism or another brain-based neurological disorder. So I've been working on this building for 2 years. It's just about done. There's a lot that I've learned over that period of time too, just about buildings and construction inspections and requirements. So, I would say maybe October. Right now we are. I would say 60% of the building's finished. So we are seeing some limited clients on a consultative basis on site. We're going to be able to have a assessment and treatment for severe behavior disorders clinic there, where we can run, true experimental multi-element functional analyses for the folks that really need that type of intensive assessment. Plus, we work with adults who have brain injuries, acquired or traumatic brain injuries, and we have a behavioral counseling aspect that we'll be able to provide on site that will follow up into the community. So we'll be able to diversify and provide an additional service to the community. It's, to me, it's really what our ultimate goal has been. It's been difficult to get there, because every time we would move, we would be full in 3 months and need more space. So we've got this huge building. We're not going to move. We've got a lot of space to work with.
Is it like 13,000 square feet or something like that?
Yeah. Yes. And it needed total renovation. So it has brand new electric, brand new plumbing, brand new HVAC, brand new drywall, brand new floors, brand new.
So you guys took it down to the studs basically.
Yeah,
and
pretty much.
Started over.
Well, it was a big, like, open dance hall kind of place, so it had these old, like, 12-ton Chrysler water cooler air conditioning units that they sent, so we had to take a lot of time to do all this. I do some of that work myself too. And I'll tell you, demo is therapeutic. You pick up a sledgehammer and start tearing up stuff. There's some therapy there too. So I did a lot of the demo myself. So yeah, it's been good and fun. And I'm just so fortunate to have such a great team. Kentucky's just a surprising place, and there's so many cool things about it. I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to open a center for behavior analysis. I never ever would have thought that we would actually have this opportunity. So we're going to open a lot of programs, like I mentioned before, and I think we'll have a better relationship with the practicum sites, more controlled time, more on-site. Community is difficult for practicum, man. If you've got to have 2 people there in the community, scheduling, travel, those things can be challenging at times. We've gotten pretty good at being proactive with everything, but this adds a diverse service that's needed. We'll be able to do it on a pretty big scale.
That's cool. Talk to me a little bit about Louisville, because I know we've chatted about it previously, but I've never been there, and it's
we're going to bring you down.
Well, all right,
we're going to get you down.
All right, well, I'll hold you to that. But I think some people when you hear the word Kentucky, it conjures up perhaps some inaccurate and perhaps unfair and perhaps uncharitable notions and things like that. And I'm just talking about someone who's born and raised in the Northeast, So I know that's not the case, because I've lived in the Deep South for a little bit, and I know that. Anyway, I'm probably going to stop because I'm going to put my foot in my mouth and further.
It's a great place.
So yeah, place. Help me out here. So what's cool about Louisville?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm from Texas, and I lived in Dallas. I lived in Fort Worth, San Antonio, Austin. When I came to Louisville, I had no idea what to expect. Louisville is a compassionate city. The mayor here, and we recently had lunch. He does a luncheon here for community businesses. And I mean, that's how cool this guy is, Greg Fisher. Now, I think he's running for president too at some point. But Louisville is a compassionate city. They have these compassion goals. Even what I've read, this during the Civil War, Louisville was a neutral place. So it's got that historical compassion component. It's diverse. It kind of reminds me of Austin, Texas. I don't know. It's got a vibe to it. Like the Keep Louisville weird. That can't, you ever see the little bumper stickers?
Oh, sure.
Keep Louisville weird, like sort of the Seattle, Austin, the cool vibe. And I like that progressiveness about Louisville. Now, the Colonel Sanders, thing is, it's what you think of. And that's kind of, when I came here, I was like, there's no way I'm going to go to Kentucky, but I'm glad I did, because not only that, the good thing about Louisville is they have so many services available. If you have a child that needs services, compared to other states, it's wow. You can get 40 hours of services here through a Medicaid waiver. It's incredible. Never even heard of that. So there's that aspect. There's, it's, if you're out on Bardstown Road, and it's normal to see a group of guys walking down the street with wheelchairs and, diverse individuals. And it's just a normal thing for this city. I've been in other cities where it's not so normal to see that level of diversity. So one of the core values of Louisville is that diversity. And you can see it here. There's so many things to do. The Derby is a big deal and a big party. The Thunder over Louisville kicks off with this huge fireworks show. It's like one of the biggest fireworks shows ever in the world. They have a chow wagon. I mean, there's just so many things to do. If you're a foodie, you would like it here, because there's like a foodie element here. Chef Lee has a cool place here. He was a top chef on that show, Top Chef. He won that. He has 2 restaurants here. So there's a foodie element. There's great services, and it's right on the river. They call it the River City. So you've got boating, you've got activities on the water skiing, and it's accessible to Nashville in just a couple of hours. You get to St. Louis in a couple of hours. You get to Chicago 4 or 5 hours. It's I think UPS's main hub is right here in Louisville, because you can get to so many places. If you look on the map, Louisville's right in the heart of America. It's just right there. It's kind of like it's the South, but it's just right on the line there. So and it's very progressive now. Louisville, Lexington, and then Florence. We have a clinic in Lexington, a 2,500 square foot intensive clinic there. Ashley Ratliff is our. We have several folks that are running that clinic over there. We have an office in Florence, which is south of Cincinnati. It's beautiful. You can get up there in an hour and a half and go to Cincinnati. They have a Geta Fest up there. Geta is like a type of meat. There's so many cool things here, so this is my adopted hometown now. This is my power spot. I love Louisville.
Well,
yeah.
Whenever I talk to you guys seem awfully proud of the area. So it sounds pretty cool. All right. So I think we've hopefully entice people to think more about, or differently about that area of the country, given your strong endorsement of it. So,
I listen. I invite any BCBA from here around the world to come to Louisville. Let us know you're here. We'll take care of you. You can ask Pat Fryman. You can ask Greg Hanley, Dr. Heward, Jose Martinez Diaz, we Vince Carbone. We've had all of these folks here, and talk to them about it. They've been here. Anybody wants to come down here, just give me a ring, and we'll arrange a time for you.
All right, very cool. So before we let you go for the rest of your day, there, Jason, I wanna end the podcast with any parting advice you might have for a newly minted BCBA.
Wow. Yeah. There's for a newly minted BCBA.
Yeah. Let's say someone just graduated, they just passed the test, just looking for a job or just started their first job.
I think that, I think one of the most important things for me was when I graduated from the University of North Texas, my thesis committee, Sigrid Glenn was part of that, and she gave me some advice that I thought was really valuable. At the time, I didn't fully understand, what she meant, but I did later. When you go get a job, you really want to make sure that environment is supportive of a behavioral community. A lot of the jobs that are offered out there, might be driven by a different set of values or different discipline. So I think it's important that, you have a behavioral community to work in, and then you have a support. You have the support, the supervision that you need. That's another thing I think you need to make sure, because a lot of the folks here, and there's a lot of great agencies around here. Ensure that you're provided with that direct supervision. Even if you're a BCBA, you still need, especially as a newly minted one, you're still going to need oversight supervision. So behavioral community, oversight supervision, and support. I think those are the core things, is that you need that level of support when you go into a new place. It's important.
All right. Great words to end with. Jason Simmons of Clinical Behavior Analysis, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.